Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. I'm so glad you could join us because today we're going to be talking about one of the most, uh, well, infamous creatures in American folklore,
That's right.
the Mothman.
Yep.
So if you're into the paranormal or just love a good creepy story, this is the deep dive for you.
Definitely.
Buckle up because we are heading straight to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where it all began back in 1966.
Mm.
Now, for those who might not be as familiar with this legend,
Sure.
just imagine this. You're in a small town. Things are pretty quiet. You know how small towns are. Then suddenly people start reporting these sightings of a creature, unlike anything they've ever seen before.
Exactly. It's not every day that you see something with glowing red eyes and a 10-foot wingspan.
That's what I'm talking about. It's huge. And it's not just some shadowy fowl at the distance. I mean, people were seeing this thing up close.
Right. And what's really interesting is how quickly these sightings turned into a full-blown legend. It spread like wildfire, didn't it?
It really did. And we're going to talk about why that is. But first, let's give everyone a little bit more background on the actual legend.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, as I said, it all started in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was November 1966 when two young couples claimed they saw this thing while driving late at night.
Late at night, yeah.
Yeah, classic. Yeah, always is right. So they described it as having, like I said, huge wings, like a moth or a bat,
Right.
but man-sized.
Yeah.
And those glowing red eyes, they said those eyes were just mesmerizing.
Oh, yeah. That's a pretty terrifying visual.
Oh, absolutely. It's the stuff of nightmares.
And it gets creepier because those weren't the only sightings, right?
Oh, not even close.
Ugh.
I mean, in the following weeks and months, more and more people came forward with similar stories. Sightings at night, near abandoned buildings, in the woods. This thing was everywhere, and it was freaking people out.
And can you imagine living in this town, hearing all these stories, not knowing what to believe?
Oh, I would be terrified to leave my house.
Exactly.
But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. On December 15th, 1967, just a little over a year after the first Mothman sighting, the Silver Bridge collapsed.
Right.
A major bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio.
It was a huge tragedy. 46 people lost their lives.
And that's when things got really interesting with the Mothman.
Oh, so.
Because some people started to connect those two events, the sightings and the bridge collapse. They saw the Mothman as a harbinger of doom, a warning that something terrible was about to happen.
You know, that idea that the Mothman was some kind of supernatural omen is something I wanted to ask you about. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, to be honest, I was curious about that too. And I've been listening to this podcast. It's called Myth or Fact, Legends and Truth. And they did a whole episode on the Mothman.
Oh, cool.
And they dug into some pretty interesting stuff. Like they talked about how some people even claimed to see the Mothman on the bridge itself just before it collapsed. Yeah. I mean, now, whether that's true or not, who knows? But it definitely adds to the whole mystery, right?
It totally does.
And the podcast made me think. I mean, does believing in something like a supernatural warning make the whole tragedy of the bridge collapse even more unsettling? Or does it make it less believable, like you're looking for an easy answer to something that might not have one?
That's a really good point. It's almost like the idea of a supernatural warning is comforting in a way because it suggests that there's some kind of order to these things, even if it's a dark order.
Right, right. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I find myself drawn to these kinds of stories, the ones that blur the line between what we know and what we don't.
Oh, me too.
I mean, it's probably why the Mothman legend has become so popular, right?
Exactly. It's a classic example of a story that just resonates with people on a deeper level. And, you know, it's not just the tragedy of the bridge collapse, it's the mystery of the creature itself, right?
Right. Like, what was this thing?
Yeah.
Was it a real creature? Some kind of undiscovered species? Or was it, like some people believe, something more paranormal?
Right. It's that unknown that really gets people's imaginations going. And think about it. The legend has inspired so many books, documentaries, even a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, the Mothman Prophecies, right? I remember seeing that.
Yep. And that movie actually introduced a whole new layer to the legend.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, in the movie, the Mothman wasn't just a creature. It was more like a supernatural being, almost like an angel. And it could predict the future. That was a big part of the plot.
Interesting.
Yeah. And even though that idea wasn't really in the original accounts from Point Pleasant, it really stuck with people.
That's fascinating, isn't it? How a story can evolve like that, take on a life of its own.
It really is. It shows you the power of storytelling, you know, how we as humans try to make sense of the things that scare us, the things we don't understand.
Exactly. I think that's a key takeaway here. The Mothman isn't just a spooky story. It's a reflection of our own need to find meaning in the unknown, even in tragedy.
I totally agree.
So where does that leave us? I mean, do we just accept that some things are unexplainable?
Maybe.
Or do we keep searching for answers, even if they lead us down some pretty strange paths? What would it take to convince you, one way or the other? It's something to ponder, especially if you ever find yourself in Point Pleasant. You never know what you might see or what you might start to believe.